Hey, noble ones, it's Oversimplified time. I'm so excited to watch another video from them. Are you excited, Circumference? Now, the video in question that we're looking at today is The War That Changed the English Language, Mini Wars, and it's a video specifically dedicated, ladies and gentlemen, to the Battle of Hastings and the surrounding historical context. Now, before jumping into the video, I do have to address, I noticed a couple of people in the comments complaining that I was stealing Oversimplified's work by making a reaction video. Apart from the fact that my videos are extremely transformative in nature, but whatever, I would like to underline that Oversimplified specifically reached out, we talked, they are aware that I make response videos and they absolutely have no problems with it. In fact, they even whitelisted me from any possible copyright claim. So Oversimplified is cool with it. And with that out of the way, let's go.
England in the Middle Ages. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. The children are playing in the village square. What a wonderful time to be alive. Hey, you're dying of dysentery. And also we're being raided by Vikings. What an awful time to be alive.
Oh, the
It's the year 900. Europe is a Viking's wet dream. Raids galore. Hey, you want to go raid Paris? Okay. That particular raid didn't go too well.
I love that they're giving, so we've got some mail, so that's historically, definitely more historically accurate than the entirety of the production behind Vikings, the TV series. And I even wish to add the majority of actual movies and productions that are set in the Viking Age. But anyways, we've got some nice mail on both sides. These guys are all using Dane axes. I would probably give them spears, to be honest, and just a few using Dane axes and maybe a few swords if you're rich. But it's fine, it's a little cartoon. Also, I love the helmet. Well, yeah, we got some conical helmets and we got these with a little mask. It's good, it's good so far.
Well, but the king of the Franks said, you guys are pretty tough and scary. How about we give you land in northern France, and in return, you protect us from other Vikings? And it was agreed. The Vikings set up the Duchy of Normandy, and then they went full-on French, converting to Christianity, learning the language, and making babies with the locals. England also had its fair share of Viking problems. In the 800s, Danish Vikings had conquered most of the country, but the Anglo-Saxons eventually managed to kick them out, although they left behind a bunch of Viking settlers. Now this guy's king. He sucks. Replace him with his brother. And he was like, hey baby, how you doing? And had a son, and then turned around and was like, hey baby, how you doing? And had another son. And then he died and no one was sure which son to make king. This one, because he's older. Not if I have anything to do with it. That works for us too. Then
oh my gosh, it's so funny because all of this is accurate. But when you say it this way, it makes it sound idiotic, which is funny. Like, not idiotic in the sense that they're doing anything wrong, but you know what I'm coming from. I don't need to explain this. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Not if I have anything to do with it, throws a knife. Oh gosh.
And he grew up and married the Duke of Normandy's daughter and had a bunch of kids. Remember this one?
Yeah.
He's important. Then his advisors came to him and said, hey man, all those Viking settlers that are living here, they might band together. And
yeah, he had them all killed. That was a mess. In fact, one of the reasons, well, one of the catalysts, if you will, when it comes to the invasion of the other Norse, but this time in higher numbers.
Kill you. Well then, why don't we kill them first? And so it was. This pissed off the Danish king, who launched an invasion, and the Vikings conquered England once again. Then the Anglo-Saxons unconquered it, then the Vikings reconquered it. The king's family had to go into exile, including Edward. Remember him?
And right now, the way he's using England, of course, England as a unified country really depends which specific century we want to focus on, because oftentimes you've got lots of different kingdoms, like Kingdom of Mercia, Northumbria being, for example, one of the most impacted by Viking invasions. You have these different ones, but then you do have situations where someone does manage to militarily occupy or liberate, if you are from the side of the people that are doing the occupation, and then they do become kings, but then there is the swapping. Also, absolutely correct. I just wanted to add that little depth, as that's what we do. This is Oversimplified, we overcomplicate. So I would consider England at the moment as a term, since this spans a bit of a long timeline. England, let's use it geographically for a moment. Let's understand it geographically.
He went to Normandy where he lived for 30 years. He and his brother Alfred tried to return to England to retake the throne from the Vikings, but they were betrayed by the Earl of Wessex, who said, hey friend, I'll take you to London where all the nobles are waiting to make you king. Oh no, look out, red hot poker in the eyes. I can't see. And thus you can't be king. Edward then escaped back to Normandy. After a few more Viking kings came and went, one finally died without an heir, and Edward was called back to England where he became king. And that's where our story begins.
Very simplified.
Here's the thing about becoming a king in the Middle Ages. Often your entire country won't support you at first. You can be vulnerable to rebellions, and it's up to you to take control. Fortunately for Edward, there was already a super powerful guy who had a lot of control over England, and if Edward could get his support, then England would be his. Who is this guy? Oh, piss, it's the guy who gave my brother the red-hot poker in the eyes. After an awkward moment where Edward exiled Godwin from the country, he eventually had to give in and let him keep his earldom, possibly after Godwin gave him a bunch of gold and said he was very, very sorry. King Edward also married Godwin's daughter. Then Godwin died, and his massive fortune was passed down to his sons, who all became earls. In particular, this one became the new Earl of Wessex.
I love how he's pissed. He's pissed. But then again, marriage in the medieval period was, particularly when it comes to the upper class and aristocracy and people in power, it was a transaction. It was a political transaction. It most of the times had nothing to do with love. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a situation where perhaps two people were paired due to political advantages, and then they did fall in love as a wedded couple. It's possible that that happened. I wouldn't exclude it. But a lot of the times that was not the case at all. Which is why, personally, if there is one meme that I absolutely love, is the one that says, hey, my girlfriend said I should treat her like a princess, so I married her to a stranger to strengthen my military alliance with Poland. It is more likely that marriage out of love was mostly a matter of the low and middle class at this point.
Harold Godwinson was now King Edward's brother-in-law. He was a close advisor to the king, a brave warrior who had proven himself in battle against the Welsh, and in many ways he was almost like a co-king. Uh-oh, Edward got old and he's on his deathbed. Possibly for religious reasons, or maybe because he wasn't happy about having to marry her, he didn't boink his wife, and as a result has no kids, meaning there's no obvious heir to the throne, meaning I'm gonna...
What religious reasons? Now, of course, this is oversimplified, so maybe I'm misremembering something and they simplify, so that's why they're not going into the details. But in general, even from like the strictest of the Catholic perspectives, believe it or not, a marriage is not valid unless you consume it. So, if anything, religious authorities, once you have a husband and wife, would push for you to boink, like they're saying here, unless there is something I'm not remembering from the, like, out of the blue now, from the historical record in this situation. What would there be? Not necessarily countering the argument, I'm just saying I don't remember it. I'll have to look it up.
Gonna be king. He does have a grandnephew, it could be him. No, let's go with me. Just one problem. I mentioned that Edward's mother was a Norman. Edward grew up in Normandy, and he had a lot of Norman friends. The current Duke of Normandy was William the Bastard. Why was he called the Bastard? One day his father was sneaking out of his castle when his advisors said, "Where are you going?" To the tanner's shop? Why? To get a... tan. But that was a lie. Firstly, because tanners give you leather, not tans, and secondly, because he was really going to see the tanner's daughter. One thing leads to another, and out comes baby William, born out of wedlock. Thus, an absolute bastard. His father died when William was 7 or 8, and he became the new Duke. He spent most of his childhood narrowly avoiding assassination, which...
As a lot of royal kin. I mean, that's one of the things when it comes to like people of power. When we see the successful ones or the ones that live a long life with power and wealth and all the surrounding benefits of being nobility, of course, we say, man, I would have loved to be a king, or man, I would have loved to be like in the imperial family. But then if you look at all of the cases in which they get murdered, and so do the entirety of the family and children and possible heirs, this is one of those cases in which I say, you know what, you can keep the nobility. Great, I'll just be me.
Probably turned him into the big balls tough guy he's remembered as today. In 1051, the town of Alençon tried to rebel against him, and the townspeople beat on dead animal skins as an insult to his commoner mother. William was furious, and he responded by, well, let's just say it wasn't pretty. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with here. William and Edward were good friends, and Edward allegedly promised that William could have the English throne after him. A decade later, Harold Godwinson even visited William and pledged an oath to him over holy relics, promising that William could be the next king of England. Although it's possible Harold only did it because William was holding his family hostage. So when William heard that the king was on his deathbed, he said, hooray, I'm gonna be king. So now you have two extremely powerful men who both think they're about to become the next king. But wait. This guy is the King of Norway. He spent most of his life as a warrior for hire, fighting for whoever would give him the most gold. You name a place, he probably fought a war there. Poland? Yep. Estonia? Yep. Against pirates in the Mediterranean? Yep. The Holy Lands? Sicily? And Bulgaria? Yep. He got crazy rich off the back of it and was swimming in gold. Then he returned home and became king. One of the previous Norwegian kings had made an agreement with one of England's Viking kings, saying that when that Viking king died, the King of Norway would get the English throne.
Oh, goodness gracious. Everybody's promising the... Yeah, when you look at it this way, once again, very simplified, but when you look at it this way, it's true. Like, everybody was getting promised this freaking kingdom if the claims are all to be believed, because of course you could fabricate claims. That's something people did historically quite a lot. In fact, and I'd like to say in a lot of countries and in a lot of cultures and in a lot of time periods. Still, it also kind of shows you the fragility of this throne at the time.
Hardrada felt that because of this agreement, he was now entitled to the English throne. He was also eager to go on one last big conquest that would turn him into a legend. So when he got word that Edward was on his deathbed, he thought, I'm going to invade England, and then I'm going to be king. So now we have three extremely powerful men who all think they're about to become the next king of England, and that means somebody's probably about to get hurt. Back in England, Harold Godwinson is watching over the dying King Edward. Suddenly, he comes out with a shocking announcement. Hey, everyone, gather in. That's it. Come closer. Don't be shy. Okay, so I've got bad news. The king is dead. I know, very sad. But good news. He said that I should be the next king. So, hooray for me. And, oh yeah, he said that if he once told anyone else they could be king, that he doesn't like them anymore, and they should just stay in Normandy.
Right.
And also he said that no one should ask any further questions. Okay, good talk. Go
Tilt the
go
land.
do whatever it is you do. Usually it took months of preparation to crown a new king, but Harold rushed it, and he had himself crowned the same day King Edward was buried. In Normandy, William's advisors came to him and said, Hey, Big Willie, bad news. Harold Godwinson has taken the English throne. And William was furious, so he sent an envoy to Harold.
WTF, of course he means WTF Taekwondo.
Harold, who said, William says you stole the throne and demands you immediately return it to him. Let me think about that. No. He said no. That bastard. Wait, I thought you were the bastard. Dude. Uncool. William immediately began gathering his armies together and preparing for an invasion of England. Now, killing a king was generally frowned upon in old-timey Europe because they were considered to have been chosen by God himself. So back in Normandy, William had to get God on his side. He needed the Pope's blessing for his conquest. So he went to the Pope and said, Godwinson made an oath to me over holy relics, and then he usurped the throne. Can I kill him? Sure, why not? So the Pope gave William his blessing, meaning William now had God on his side. Everything was ready to go. Just one problem. The wind. It was blowing the wrong way, and William had to wait with his army in Normandy, while Godwinson waited with his army in the south of England. They waited, and waited, and waited, and then William said screw it and sailed for England and got shipwrecked because the wind was blowing the wrong way. So then he decided to keep on waiting. They waited for 2 months and the wind never changed. Eventually Godwinson got bored and also ran out of food for his soldiers, so he sent them all home and he returned to London. The south coast was undefended and all William could do was keep waiting. While the northerly wind kept William in Normandy, it was carrying Hardrada and his Viking army to England. Hardrada landed near the old Viking city of York and defeated a regional army led by the northern earls, and York surrendered. When Godwinson heard about this, he must have been pretty upset. He had just
imagine that. Like, not only you have to deal with the southern border and the problems with the Duchy of Normandy, but then you also have to take care of the northeast and the problems with the other Scandinavian one, and so that could, of course, stretch your armies thin and your resources location, and then they could stab you in the back. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, I would not want to be in the position of this king. I would rather be in the position of William the Conqueror.
Expanded his army, and now he had to gather them all together again and march all the way north. He made the exhausting journey in just 4 days, which is crazy quick, and he caught the Vikings off guard and unprepared for battle. The two armies stood on either side of the river Derwent. Legend says that a berserker Viking single-handedly held the only bridge crossing the river, dodging arrows and fending off attackers, until some English soldiers got under the bridge in a barrel and gave him the old spear in the jewels. This gave the Vikings enough time to form a shield wall, but because they'd been caught off guard, many weren't wearing their chainmail and armor, and the English eventually defeated them, killing Hardrada, and with him, bringing the Viking era in England to an end.
Note how he said, I know he said chainmail, usually we prefer to say mail shirt, but I mean, it's fine. Notice how he didn't say they didn't have time to wear their leather jerkins, their black biker gear leather jerkins. They are more accurate. Say it again. Uh-oh.
Finally, William's fleet of over 700 ships and 14,000 men set sail and landed on the English coast at Pevensey and set up camp near Hastings. And Harold was still all the way in York. His exhausted army had to march all the way south just days after their battle with the Vikings. Harold made it to London and considered just staying there and waiting for William to come to him. But William forced Harold's hand by burning down a bunch of villages. Harold's army set out and met William's on the 14th of October, 1066.
Yeah, probably a mistake.
And both sides prepared themselves for the Battle of Hastings. The English were on a hill, so they decided to stay there because it was a good defensive position.
Absolutely, that was advantageous at first.
The Normans approached, and the two sides probably spent a while yelling at each other. William and the Normans had a few tactical advantages over the English. The first were the archers. The Normans sent volley after volley of arrows at the English, who formed a shield wall in defense. Then William sent his infantry up the hill. The English threw anything they had at them, and the Normans couldn't break through the shield wall. Then the Normans' next tactical advantage...
Yeah, usually to try and break through a shield wall, I would say cavalry is the best tactic. There is an interesting detail when it comes to the ancient Romans that were dealing with a shield wall, in fact, almost at testudo, that was used by the Gauls instead. And it was so compact that the Romans just couldn't penetrate it. And so what they do, and this is in the record, I know it sounds crazy, but what they do is that they, of course, surround them because it makes it harder to make a shield wall effective when you're surrounded. You can still do it, but it gets problematic. But then they even jumped on top of the shields, and then they literally, at least we are told by the sources, took the shields and removed them by force, almost one by one from the soldiers. Now, usually in the movies, we see the Romans being the disciplined ones with their testudo or their shield walls, and then we see the barbarians jumping on the shields and get stabbed like crazy. But believe it or not, as you could see, there is one instance, at least in the sources, if we are to believe them, that there was the Roman legionaries who jumped on top of a well-organized Gallic shield wall formation. But yeah, as I was saying, shield walls are difficult to break, but cavalry usually is a good way to break them if said shield wall is made of soldiers that aren't veterans, or perhaps they're not highly trained or have some morale problems, or there are other things you can try to envelop them, like for instance they are being engaged by heavy infantry in the front and then cavalry goes in the back. That's another way to take care of a shield wall, but in this case they are on top of a hill, so it was a very easily defensible position probably, and which also made it difficult to do something with cavalry. And at this time it is a form of shock cavalry, but this is before the technique called a lance couché with the couched lance, and of course there was no plate armor, there was no lance rest, so it's a different type of cavalry charges.
Came into play. William sent his cavalry up the hill, but even they struggled to break through the shield wall defenses. Wave after wave of infantry and cavalry came, and Harold knew all he had to do was let the Normans exhaust themselves and he would win. But then something a bit strange happened. It's possible the Normans incorrectly believed William had been killed. Maybe they lost their will to fight against the shield wall, or maybe it was an intentional deception tactic. But suddenly, the Norman forces turned and ran away from the English. Believing they had won, the English broke their shield wall and chased down the retreating Normans, who then turned around,
I would say the Anglo-Saxon in this case, but yes,
encircled the English troops and cut them down. In the chaotic fighting that followed, Harold Godwinson was killed, the most popular theory being that he took an arrow in the eye. The English were defeated and William had won. He was no more just a bastard. Now he was a conqueror. At first the English nobles were reluctant to make him king, but William burned down a few more villages and the nobles eventually gave in and offered him the crown. As he was coronated, the local villagers in Westminster let out a cheer of support, but William thought it was a riot, so he burned down the village. William then had to go on a long and costly campaign of quelling rebellions and burning down villages all over England to force the people into submission. And England went through a massive transformation under its new Norman rule. English nobles were replaced with Normans. They built castles and grand cathedrals, but one of them...
Exactly, yeah, the replacement of the upper echelon of society is very important when it comes to establishing new control over the occupied lands. Something like this would be done as well with religious authoritative figures, such as bishops, for instance. That's happened a lot in history, and it was one of the main problems of the struggle between the Holy Roman Empire with its emperor as a secular authority and instead the papal authorities, and that's why they with the Vatican, and that's why they struggled so much as to who's allowed to nominate bishops, because when you put your people in positions of power and you know that these are people loyal to you, it is a way to strengthen and secure your rulership. I want to see what he says on the section about the language, since I imagine he's going to talk about it. It's in the title.
Most interesting changes occurred within the English language. The Normans brought their dialect of French to England, and it merged with Old English in ways we still live with today. First of all, the Normans were obviously the ones in power, so words related to power like government, judge, castle, and crown come from the Normans. Words that are considered posher or more refined are usually the Norman ones. At first, the Anglo-Saxons probably weren't that friendly to the Normans, while the Normans likely weren't that amiable towards the Anglo-Saxons. An Anglo-Saxon might come into a room, but a Norman would enter into a chamber. An Anglo-Saxon might buy themselves a shirt, while a Norman would purchase a blouse. And while that filthy peasant's new shirt may be fair, the Norman blouse is absolutely beautiful. The Normans actually considered some Anglo-Saxon words so crude that I can't even say them on YouTube. But there's more. Ask an Anglo-Saxon what job he does, and he might respond with some low-level trade, such as a baker, a miller, or a shoemaker. But a Norman has a skilled trade, like a painter, a tailor, or a merchant. The Anglo-Saxon farmers working in the fields owned many cows, pigs, and sheep, but once they were served up in a Norman banquet, they became beef, pork, and mutton. And written English changed too. Since many Anglo-Saxons couldn't write, the written language was romanticized. Your annoying friend that says Cool Whip might just be speaking an Old English dialect, as the Anglo-Saxons originally wrote it when, where, and what, but the Normans swapped the W and H around, and the long English A vowel sounded more like an O to the Normans, so you can thank them that you live in a home, not a ham. Hey, fun fact about William, the man couldn't read or write, not in French, not in English, not in anything. Well, what if I told you there was a place where you could learn French,
And
English...
that's, of course, the sponsorship. Anyway, very well done, as always. I really enjoyed it, and I think Oversimplified deserves the like. And 34 million views. Wow, man, that's good. Good for you, man. I hope that the sponsor paid a lot, because, I mean, 34 million views, that sponsor must have loved you. Anyways, thank you so much for making this video. Oversimplified, as always. Massive supporter of your work. I really like it. And excellent, not only when it comes to the animations and the way they try to represent things in a coherent way that is definitely superior to what Hollywood does. So, if anything, that's the one thing we have to give them. Now, it's oversimplified. We understand that. So anyone who comes here because they want to have an overall panoramic, like an overall broad idea of what's going on historically, but I don't think anyone is going to consider this a university lecture, and clearly there are sometimes some things that they don't get exactly right, or they are maybe oversimplified too much, but I think most people come here for the entertainment value, and as long as that's clearly, I mean, it's a cartoon. In fact, it's easier to expect this to be more entertainment than anything than a movie, because a movie with real people, you would expect, particularly then if they add the word documentary like they did with Cleopatra, that's what I'm gonna have a problem with. But here, I really liked it, so it was really fun. I hope you did as well, and let me know in the comments what the next episode from Oversimplified you would like me to review and comment on should be. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. Say bye, circumference.